Before today's video starts, we just want to say big thanks to Dashlane for sponsoring this video. I recently started using Dashlane, and it is the best, simplest, and safest way to store and fill in your passwords and personal information. I love Dashlane because it simplified my life and made me feel more secure online. I got a question for you. How many online accounts do you think you have? I thought I had around 50 because I use a bunch of social media sites and have a bunch of subscription services to news websites so I can do research for the channel. I scanned my Gmail account with Dashlane and I was completely stunned to learn that I had 300 online accounts. Of course, Dashlane also works on your desktop or laptop. Just look at how quickly it fills in your info and your password. And it does this for every website you have an account with. Besides securely saving and filling in your passwords, Dashlane also has a VPN which covers all your devices. So you don't need another VPN, and Dashlane is inexpensive compared to other VPNs, plus you get extra features that are not available with other VPNs. Dashlane will actively keep you safer online by protecting your passwords and providing you with a VPN, so it's the only tool you need for your online security. For your free 30-day trial of Dashlane Premium, go to dashlane.com/criminallylisted and use the promo code criminallylisted at the checkout. Number 3. CJ and Billy Vosseler. In 1980, Ruth Parker was living in Madison, Wisconsin. One day, she was looking through personal ads in the magazine Mother Earth News. She came across an ad that caught her attention, and she wrote to the man who placed the ad. His name was Charles Vosseler, and he lived in Newton, New Hampshire. Over the next year, Ruth and Charles exchanged letters and phone calls. Ruth then moved to Newton, and the two got married. After they got married, they would buy rundown houses, live in them, and then flip them for money. On December 9th, 1982, Ruth gave birth to a son who was named Charles after his father. He went by the nickname CJ. On April 21st, 1984, Ruth gave birth to a second son whom they named William, but they called him Billy. Not long after Billy was born, Charles got his realtor's license and he started his own real estate company in Rochester, New Hampshire. The family also moved into a really rundown property that had accidentally been purchased by Charles's father. The property was a source of tension between Ruth and Charles. Ruth did not think that the house was safe for the children to live in. After an accident where Billy pulled down a set of cabinets that were attached to a wall, Ruth told Charles she was leaving him and she was taking the children. Charles found an apartment for them, and they moved in. On October 9th, 1986, Charles picked up 3-year-old CJ and 2-year-old William and told Ruth he was going to take them to Connecticut to visit some family for the weekend. He said he would drop them off on Sunday, but he didn't. Ruth phoned Charles's family, but it turned out that he did not go there that weekend. On Monday morning, she went to his real estate office. When she got there, she saw some employees walking out of the office with boxes. She talked to them, and they told her on Friday, which was the same day that Charles left with the boys, Charles announced to his employees that he was shutting down the office effective immediately. Ruth then got into their storage unit. When she did, she discovered it was empty. It turned out that months earlier, Charles had auctioned off all their possessions that were in storage. The next thing Ruth did was check their bank accounts. She learned that her name had been taken off the joint accounts and all their money was gone. Bills had not been paid in some time, and her car was near repossession. The credit cards were also missing. Then, At her home, she noticed that all the recent photographs of both her sons were gone. Ruth realized that Charles took the photographs of their sons to make it more difficult for her to create missing persons flyers. It became painfully obvious to Ruth that Charles had been planning the abduction for months. Ruth called the police and tried to report her sons missing, but the police were indifferent to the situation. Ruth said the officer she spoke to said something she would never forget. He said, "What's the big deal? They're with their dad." In the mid-1980s, when the boys went missing, many police forces did not consider parental abduction to be a serious issue. Eventually, Ruth was able to report the boys missing. The only recent images of the boys that could be found was from a video of a friend's birthday. Stills from the videos were used to make the missing persons flyers. In 1987, several months after the boys were reported missing, a woman in Stillwell, Oklahoma went to a doctor's office. While she was in the waiting room, she noticed a poster that had photos of missing children, and she recognized two of the boys. They were CJ and Billy. They were the son of a man she was dating who went by the name Charles Watson. He claimed to be a doctor. The real Dr. Charles Watson was a friend of Charles whom he went to university with. The woman reported the location of Charles and the boys, and the FBI checked out the tip 11 days after they received it. When they got there, they found the house that Charles and the boys had been living in had been burnt to the ground. There was also the burnt out shell of a car in the driveway. That was the last confirmed sighting of Charles, CJ, and Billy. There were rumors that Charles was in Oklahoma in December 2006, but those rumors were never confirmed. At the time of this video, CJ is 36 years old and Billy is 35 years old. If Charles is still alive, he is 77 years old. He may be using the first name Malcolm or Martin and the last names Amadon, Foster, or Wilson. Charles has a condition called horizontal nystagmus. This causes his right eye to twitch from right to left when he is stressed out. Charles is currently wanted by the FBI for unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, parental kidnapping, and harboring. Ruth is hopeful that after 33 years, one day soon, she will be reunited with her two sons. Number 2. Tionda and Diamond Bradley. Tracy Bradley, who lives in Chicago, Illinois, has 4 daughters. In the summer of 2001, her daughter Rita was 11, Tionda was 10, Victoria was 9, and her youngest daughter, Diamond, was 3 years old. On the night of August 5, 2001, Rita and Victoria stayed over at their maternal grandmother's home. Tracy had to work on the morning of August 6th. She made lunches for children who were attending a summer camp at a nearby park. Tionda was enrolled in summer school, but Tracy decided to keep her home that day to look after Diamond. Also, that afternoon, they were planning on going on a camping trip. Diamond's father gave Tracy a ride to work. She arrived at around 6:40 a.m. She worked steadily until 8 a.m. and then she had a few minutes free. She called home, but there was no answer. She called again at 8:07, but again, there was no answer. She called a third time at 8:45 a.m., and yet again, there was no answer. Tracy just assumed that Tionda and Diamond were still sleeping. Tracy finished work at 11:40 a.m. and Diamond's father picked her up. He took her to a grocery store and then he drove her home. Tracy arrived at her apartment at around 12:40 p.m. When she got into the apartment, she found a note on the kitchen table. She thought that the note was in Tionda's handwriting. The note said that Tionda and Diamond were going to the store and to the playground. When the two girls didn't come home, Tracy went looking for them, but she could not find them. After searching for hours, that evening she reported them missing. A massive search was launched, but no trace of the girls were found. This led to an extensive kidnapping investigation. But despite the police's best efforts, they couldn't figure out what happened to the girls. A handwriting expert analyzed the handwriting on the note, and they believe that Tionda wrote it. Supposedly, at times, the relationship between Tracy and the police was complicated. The police have accused her of not cooperating with the investigation, but Tracy has denied this. She took a polygraph exam and denied having anything to do with the disappearance of her daughters. She passed the exam. The police have stated that Tracy is not a suspect in the disappearance of her daughters. The police did develop one plausible suspect. Tracy has never publicly revealed the identity of Tionda's biological father. One man who was thought to be the father was a man from North Africa. According to the website, The Charlie Project, up until 2001, shortly before the girls disappeared, the man had been paying child support. The police theorized that he found out that he may not have been the father and he became angry. So he kidnapped the girls. Detectives from Chicago traveled to Morocco to investigate the theory, but they did not find any evidence that the girls were ever in the country. For nearly 2 decades, the case has remained cold. Then in the spring of 2019, the family of the girls got a message on Facebook from a woman in Texas calling herself Lele Rodriguez. She claimed that she was really Tionda. She said that she and Diamond were together in Texas. She claimed that they both had kids and that Diamond was enrolled in college. The woman knew a lot about the case, but everything she told them was already public knowledge. The woman was adamant that she was Tionda, and she even volunteered to take a DNA test. The family got in contact with the FBI, and they investigated the woman's claims. It turned out that it was just a disturbing hoax. The woman was not Tionda. The family of Tionda and Diamond are still holding out hope that they are still alive, and one day they'll be reunited with them. If the girls are still alive, at the time of this video, Tionda is 28 and Diamond is 21. Number 1. Annette and Mylette Anderson. Elizabeth and Jack Anderson, who lived in Jacksonville, Florida, had 3 children. In the summer of 1974, their daughter Donna was 13, Lillian, who went by the name Annette, was 11, and Mylette was 6 years old. On the evening of August 1st, 1974, Elizabeth got a call that her sister was ill. Just after 6 p.m., she and her eldest daughter, Donna, went to visit her. They left Annette and Mylette home alone. Jack was a commercial fisherman, and he was working when Elizabeth and Donna left the house. He planned to be home at 7 p.m. But there was a problem with the motor of his boat, so he was running late. He called home around 7 p.m. and he spoke to Annette. Jack said everything sounded fine, but he could hear their dog barking. Annette told him that the dog was just barking at some birds that were in the front yard. Jack said he'd be home soon, and then he hung up the phone. Jack called back 20 minutes later, and there was no answer. He rushed home and discovered that Annette and Mylette were gone. The dog, which was allowed to roam all over the house, was in one of the bedrooms, and the bedroom door was closed. The house showed no signs of a break-in or forced entry. All the doors of the house were closed, but they weren't locked. Besides the girls, only one thing was missing, and that was a doll that Mylette often carried with her. The girls were immediately reported missing. A major concern was that both girls had health problems, and they needed to take medication. Annette needed to take a thyroid tablet daily, and Mylette had slight asthma and a weak heart. Mylette needed medication anytime she got overexcited or overtired. A neighbor reported seeing a white sedan, possibly a Thunderbird or a Mustang, parked in the family's driveway sometime between 6 and 7 p.m. Other than that, no one saw or heard anything unusual. No one saw the girls leave the house. The police were convinced that someone took the girls, and they did not run away. They even thought that the kidnapping had been planned. The family lived on a secluded, dead-end street, so there was only one way in and out of the street. It's suspected that the kidnapper had planned on kidnapping the girls, or at least one of them, and when he saw that they were left alone, he saw his opportunity to make his move. Unfortunately, Annette and Mylette have never been found. What is even more disturbing about the disappearance of the Anderson sisters is that they weren't the only young girls to go missing from Jacksonville in 1974. Just a week and a half before the sisters went missing, on July 21st, 9-year-old Jean Schoen left her grandmother's house to go to a variety store, which was 2 blocks away. Sadly, she never returned to her grandmother's home, and she was reported missing. The police were able to piece together Jean's last known movements. She made it to the store, and she bought a pack of cigarettes for her uncle. She told the store employee she was going to play pinball at an establishment called The Hangout. The police interviewed the owner of The Hangout. He told the police that Jean had come to The Hangout, but he told her that it was closed because he had just washed the floors. He suggested coming back a short time later after the floors had dried. Jean realized she forgot the cigarettes at the store, and she went back and retrieved them. Jean then supposedly made her way to a laundromat where she met 2 of her friends. The 2 friends said that a man on a blue bicycle pulled up in front of the laundromat. He got off his bike, came inside, grabbed Jean, and dragged her into the washroom. They emerged not long afterward, and Jean was crying. Jean did not scream or try to fight off the man. The man forced her to get on his bike, and then he rode off with her. Jean's 2 friends said that they ran after them, but they couldn't keep up. This was the last time anyone who knew Jean saw her alive. Jean's 2 friends said that the man who kidnapped her was white and had light hair that was styled in a way that was similar to Elvis Presley's. Jean Schoen has never been found dead or alive. On September 27, 1974, 2 months after Annette and Mylette went missing, 12-year-old Virginia Helm left her family's home in Jacksonville to go to a variety store to buy some soap. The entire trip should have taken her about 20 minutes. When she didn't come home after 45 minutes, her father started searching for her. But he could not find any trace of her, so she was reported missing. The police canvassed the area between Virginia's house and the store, and they interviewed many people. Several people reported seeing a red compact car in the area. The red compact car would become an important part of the investigation. A day before Virginia went missing, her friend, who lived in the same neighborhood, was approached by a man in a red compact car. He told her to get in the car or he would kill her. Instead, she ran and found help. 3 days after Virginia went missing, a couple went to the police and reported an odd encounter that they had that day. They were driving and they noticed a red Volkswagen Bug pulled over on the side of the road near the border of Duval County, where Jacksonville is located, in Nassau County. A man was standing outside of the car. The couple asked the man if he needed help, and then they looked in the back seat. They saw a young girl who looked like Virginia on the floor in the back seat. She was on her knees, and she was pulling herself up by pushing down on the back seat. The couple noticed that the girl's pupils were dilated. She also looked afraid. She was rapidly looking back and forth. The couple asked the man about the girl, but he did not respond to them. Instead, he quickly got into his car and drove off. As he drove away, a bag fell out of his car. The couple grabbed the bag and they gave it to the police. The bag was checked for fingerprints, but no viable prints were found. Just over 3 weeks after Virginia disappeared, on October 16, 1974, 12-year-old Rebecca Green left her home in Jacksonville to go to a variety store that was only 5 blocks from her home. Just like Jean and Virginia, she did not make it home from the store. The police interviewed the store employee, and he said that Rebecca bought some soft drinks and then left. The police canvassed the area, but no one saw what happened to Rebecca after she left the store. On October 25th, 9 days after Rebecca went missing, the remains of a young girl were found in a wooded area near the University of Florida in Jacksonville. She was buried in a shallow grave, and she was just wearing a blouse. She had been shot once in the head with a .22 caliber handgun. The parents of all 5 missing girls waited with bated breath to see if it was their daughter. It turned out that the body was Virginia Helm, who went missing a month earlier. The last confirmed sighting of her was less than 6 miles away from where her body was found. The area where Virginia's remains were found was searched, but no traces of the other 4 girls were found. Some of the other girls' parents said that they were a bit relieved after hearing the news. They said that they went back to hoping that their daughters were still alive. Then after that, girls in Jacksonville stopped disappearing. Nearly 3 years later, on August 2, 2019, some remains washed up on Little Fort George Island, which is about 20 miles from Jacksonville. Once again, The parents of the girls dreaded the medical examiner's results. It turned out that the skeletal remains were 12-year-old Rebecca Green. Because of the state of the remains, the cause of death could not be determined. The police in Jacksonville are pretty sure that all 5 cases are connected. All the girls were between the ages of 6 and 12, and they all went missing within 2.5 months of each other. Besides the Anderson sisters, they were all kidnapped before or after they visited a variety store. However, the police have never been able to make an arrest in any of the cases. But the police do have a suspect in one of the cases. That is the disappearances of Annette and Mylette Anderson. The suspect's name is John Paul Knowles. Knowles was born in April 1947 in Orlando, Florida, but he grew up in Jacksonville. He was a problem child, and his parents had a hard time controlling him. By the time Knowles was 17, he had been sent to a boys' reformatory school 6 times for crimes like theft and breaking and entering. In the spring of 1965, when Knowles was 19 years old, a police officer pulled him over while he was driving a stolen car. Knowles managed to steal the officer's gun, and he forced the officer to get into the car. 2 hours later, Knowles let the officer go. Knowles was eventually arrested, and he was convicted of kidnapping. He was sentenced to 1 to 5 years in a state prison. He was paroled after 2.5 years, but he wouldn't be out of prison long. Between 1967 and 1974, he was in and out of prison several times. Usually, he spent 6 months of every year in prison. While in prison, Knowles became interested in astrology. He started reading the magazine, American Astrology. Sometime in late 1972 or early 1973, through the magazine, he became pen pals with a woman named Angela Kovic, who lived in San Francisco, California. She became smitten with Knowles, and in September 1973, she visited him in prison. During their meeting, Knowles proposed to her, and she agreed to marry him. She then hired a lawyer in prison. Knowles was released in the spring of 1974, and in May of that year, he flew to San Francisco to be with Kovic. But a week after he arrived, Kovic had second thoughts and broke off the relationship. Bitter over the experience, Knowles went back to Jacksonville. Sometime after he got back, he got into a bar fight and he stabbed a bartender. He was arrested and he was held in jail. It is not exactly clear when he was arrested, but most reports say that he was arrested in May 1974. Then several months later, on July 26th, he picked the lock of his cell and he escaped from jail. If Knowles was in jail from May until July 26th, he could not have been responsible for the disappearance of Jean Schoen. Jean went missing on July 21st, which is 5 days before Knowles escaped from jail. On the night that Knowles escaped from jail, he broke into the Jacksonville home of 65-year-old retired teacher Alice Curtis. He bound and gagged her. Unfortunately, Curtis's dentures became dislodged and they went down her throat. She ended up suffocating to death. After stealing some money, Knowles took off in Curtis's car, which was a white Dodge Dart. Over the next several days, Knowles crashed with friends. 5 days after he escaped, on the evening of August 1st, Annette and Mylette Anderson went missing. Earlier that same day, 13-year-old Imogene Sanders went missing from Warner Robins, Georgia. She went out with some friends and she never returned home. Her remains were found in a shallow grave nearly 2 years later near Macon, Georgia. However, because of the state of the remains, she wasn't identified until December 2011. The day after Ima and the Anderson sisters went missing, Knowles was in Atlantic Beach, Florida, which is about 16 miles from Jacksonville. While he was in Atlantic Beach, he somehow got into the home of 49-year-old Marjorie Howe. Using a nylon stocking, he strangled her to death. 2.5 weeks later, on August 23rd, Knowles was in Missoula, Georgia. He forced his way into the house where 22-year-old Kathy Pierce lived with her 3-year-old son. Knowles strangled her to death with a telephone cord. He did not physically harm her son. After that murder, Knowles left the South. On September 3rd, 1974, he was in Lima, Ohio. He went to a bar and he met 32-year-old William Bates. They left the bar together. Bates' wife reported him missing when he did not come home. Not far from the bar, the police found Alice Curtis's Dodge Dart. William Bates' body was found in a wooded area just outside the city 2 months later. He was nude and he had been strangled to death. After Knowles killed Bates, he stole his Chevy Impala, his money, and his credit cards. He then started driving west. Somewhere in his travels, he purchased a gun. On September 12, 1974, he encountered 62-year-old Emmett Johnson and his 59-year-old wife Lois, who were camping in Ely, Nevada. He shot them both in the head, and then he stole their credit cards and money. Their bodies were discovered 6 days later. By then, Knowles was long gone. On September 21, 1974, Knowles encountered 42-year-old Charlene Hicks near Seguin, Texas. He either met her at a rest stop or he found her on the side of the road after her car broke down. When Hicks encountered Knowles, she was on her way to a family chili cookout. Her family reported her missing when she didn't show up. 4 days later, her nude body was found in a field. She had been strangled to death. On September 23, 1974, 2 days after killing Hicks, Knowles met 49-year-old Ann Dawson in Birmingham, Alabama. He was able to convince her to go on a road trip with him. But then, 6 days later, while they were in Mississippi, Knowles strangled Dawson and then dumped her body. Her body has never been found. Just over 2 weeks later, Knowles was in Marlborough, Connecticut. He knocked on the door of the home where 35-year-old Karen Wine lived with her 16-year-old daughter, Dawn Wine. At the time, Dawn was the only one home. When Dawn opened the door, Knowles forced his way in. He then sexually assaulted Dawn. When Karen came home, he sexually assaulted her as well. He ended up strangling them both to death with a pair of silk stockings. 3 days later, Knowles forced his way into the home of 53-year-old Doris Hovey, who lived in Woodford, Virginia. Knowles grabbed Hovey's husband's rifle and he shot her in the head. He did not sexually assault her or steal anything from her house. He even left the murder weapon behind. Knowles then drove to Florida. In one of his home invasions, Knowles had stolen a tape recorder. As he traveled, he used the tape recorder to record his confessions. When Knowles got back to Florida, he went to see the lawyer that Angelikovic had hired to get him out of jail, Sheldon Yavitz. He confessed to Yavitz that he had killed a lot of people. Yavitz told Knowles to turn himself in, but Knowles said that he would rather go out in a blaze of glory. Knowles gave Yavitz the recording of his confessions, and then he left for Macon, Georgia. Yavitz held onto the recording, and he did not contact the police. As Knowles drove to Macon, it's believed he picked up two hitchhikers, 23-year-old Edward Hillard and 20-year-old Debbie Griffin. Hillard's body was found 2 days later in a wooded area near Macon. He had been shot multiple times in the head. Griffin's body was not found, but her purse and some of her clothing were found near Hillard's body. They were all splattered with blood. Debbie Griffin's body has never been found. Knowles has never been definitively tied to the murders, but he is the prime suspect. On November 6, 1974, 4 days after it's believed he killed Hillard and Griffin, Knowles went to a gay bar in Macon where he met 45-year-old Carswell Carr. Carswell was married, but that night, his wife, who was a nurse, was working the night shift at the hospital. They went back to Carswell's house, which was in the neighboring city of Milledgeville. Knowles tied up Carswell and then started torturing him by stabbing him with a pair of scissors. Knowles' 15-year-old daughter, Amanda, heard her father screaming, and she went to his bedroom to investigate. When she got there, her father was dying from a heart attack. Knowles strangled her to death with a silk stocking. He then left, and Carswell died from the heart attack. Carswell's wife and Amanda's mother discovered the bodies when she returned home from work. The same morning that their bodies were found, Knowles checked into a hotel in downtown Atlanta, Georgia. He went to the hotel bar where he met a British journalist named Sandy Fox. They had an affair that lasted for nearly a week. Together, they traveled to West Palm Beach, Florida. But when they got there, they split up. Amazingly, Knowles did not harm her. Before they parted ways, Knowles told her that he was going to be killed soon and it was going to be over something that he had done in the past. He asked her to write a book about him after he was dead. Shortly after they split up, Knowles kidnapped a woman named Susan Mackenzie, who was a friend of Fox's. Mackenzie was able to get out of the car that Knowles was driving, which was a Chevy Impala, and she managed to get help. She immediately reported the incident with the police, and the police were told to be on the lookout for a Chevy Impala. Not long afterward, an officer spotted the car and he pulled Knowles over. When the officer approached the car, Knowles pointed a sawed-off shotgun at him. Knowles made the officer lie on the ground and then he drove away. Knowles knew he had to ditch his car, so he kidnapped a woman named Barbara Tucker from her sister's home in West Palm Beach. Before they left in Tucker's car, Knowles tied up her sister. After they left, Tucker's sister was able to free herself and she called the police. The police dusted her home for prints and they found several fingerprints. The fingerprints were entered into a database, and after the police got the results, they realized that they were looking for John Paul Knowles. The police then tracked down Sandy Fox. They asked her if Knowles had given her anything. It turned out that she had a watch that he had taken from Amanda Carr. That night, Knowles dropped off Barbara Tucker in Fort Pierce, Florida. He left her physically unharmed. At this point, the police around the state were on high alert. The next morning, which was November 16, 1974, 35-year-old state trooper Charles Campbell pulled Knowles over near Perry, Florida. When Campbell walked up to the car, he saw that Knowles had a gun pulled out and it was aimed at him. Knowles had Campbell handcuff himself and then he had him get into the back seat of his cruiser. Knowles got into the driver's seat of the cruiser and he drove off. Another motorist saw what happened. They found a phone and reported the kidnapping. Knowles knew that driving around in a police car was not smart. So using the cruiser's sirens and lights, he pulled over a Ford Grand Torino that was being driven by 29-year-old James Meyer. He forced Meyer to get into the back seat of his own car, and then he moved Campbell into the back seat as well. With his two hostages in the back seat, Knowles drove to Lakeland, Georgia, where he stopped at a store and bought some cigarettes. The owner noticed that there was a uniformed state trooper in the back seat of the car. He thought it was odd, but he didn't say anything. Later that day, the owner of the store was watching the news, and he saw that a state trooper, who was on patrol, had gone missing. The store owner called the police and told them that he saw the missing trooper and he was in the back of a blue Ford Grand Torino. The next day, sheriff's deputies in Henry County, Georgia, saw a blue Grand Torino near the city of McDonough. So they set up a roadblock. Knowles chose not to stop, and he rammed the roadblock. After crashing, he ran into some nearby woods. The police looked in the car, and Campbell and Meyer were not inside of it. Not long after Knowles went into the woods, he re-emerged. He had injured himself when he ran into the roadblock, and he was bleeding from the head. A man named David Clark, who lived on the edge of the woods, spotted Knowles as he came out of the woods. He grabbed a gun, and at gunpoint, he led Knowles to a neighbor's house where they called the police. Knowles was then taken into custody. Knowles refused to reveal the whereabouts of Campbell or Myers, and he wouldn't say if they were dead or alive. But sadly, 4 days after Knowles was arrested, hunters found the bodies of 29-year-old James Meyer and 35-year-old Charles Campbell in a forest in Palousca County, Georgia. They both had been handcuffed to a tree and shot in the head. After Knowles was arrested, he confessed to all the murders he committed, including several the police weren't aware of. In total, he claimed he killed 35 people. This includes killing 3 random people in San Francisco on the night that Kovic broke up with him. However, the police were never able to confirm that Knowles committed many of these murders, like the supposed San Francisco murders. One set of murders that Knowles confessed to was the killing of the Anderson sisters. He said that he strangled them and buried their body in a swamp on the outskirts of Jacksonville. The area where he said he buried them was searched, and their bodies weren't found. Another problem with his confession is that on the same day that he supposedly killed the Anderson sisters, he allegedly killed Ima Sanders. Knowles told the police that he picked up Ima near Warner Robins, Georgia, which is about 260 miles from Jacksonville. He then dumped her body near Macon, which is just north of Warner Robins. Since Macon and Jacksonville are about 270 miles apart, it's possible that after Knowles killed Ima and dumped her body, he drove back to Jacksonville. According to Google Maps, the drive would have taken him less than 4 hours. The Anderson sisters were kidnapped sometime between 7 and 7:20 p.m. That means if Knowles left Macon before 3 p.m., he would have made it to Jacksonville in time to kidnap the girls. Unfortunately, the timetable of Ima's murder isn't known, and Knowles was vague on details pertaining to both kidnappings. People who think that Knowles killed the Anderson sisters point out that when they were kidnapped, Knowles was driving Alice Curtis's white Dodge Dart. A neighbor of the Andersons reported seeing a white sedan in their driveway shortly before the girls went missing. Also, the day after Annette and Mylette went missing, Knowles was in Atlantic Beach, Florida, which is only 16 miles from Jacksonville. That means if he really did kill Ima Sanders, he made his way back towards the Jacksonville area after he did it. So was Knowles telling the truth about the Anderson sisters? Was he telling the truth about killing Ima Sanders? A big problem for investigators is that Knowles wanted to be an infamous killer. Because he wanted notoriety, they think he inflated his victim count. According to First Coast News, the current investigator on the Anderson case does not believe that Knowles killed the Anderson sisters. He thinks that Knowles was just lying to make himself look more notorious than he really was. He points out that Knowles never said anything about the case that wasn't already public knowledge. Also, no physical evidence links him to the kidnapping. Another reason he believes that Knowles did not kidnap Annette and Mylette is that it's believed that one killer is responsible for the murders of the Anderson sisters, Jean Schoen, Virginia Helm, and Rebecca Green. Knowles was either in jail or out of state when the other girls went missing or were killed. But other people point out that the Anderson sisters' kidnapping is different from the other 3 cases. Annette and Mylette were kidnapped from their home, while the other girls were abducted in public after they visited a variety store. The police were not able to question Knowles further and get more details from him regarding his confessions. On December 18th, the sheriff of Douglas County, Georgia, Earl Lee, and FBI agent Ron Angel escorted Knowles away from the Douglas County jail. Knowles had promised to show them where he ditched the gun that he used to kill Trooper Charles Campbell and James Meyer. While they were driving, Knowles supposedly tried to grab Lee's gun, so Angel shot him 3 times. John Paul Knowles, who was nicknamed the Casanova Killer, was dead at 28. Not including Annette and Mylette Anderson, it's strongly suspected that Knowles killed 16 people. With so many questions surrounding the disappearance of the Anderson sisters, we may never know if Knowles was truly responsible. Their family, and the families of Jean Schoen, Virginia Helm, and Rebecca Green, are all hoping that they'll get some closure in their cases. But after 45 years, they understand that the cases may never be solved. During his 4-month killing spree, Knowles had a short affair with journalist Sandy Fox. He had asked her to write a book about him. She ended up doing just that. 3 years after Knowles' killing spree, in 1977, her book, Killing Time, was published, and it was a bestseller. Thanks a lot for watching today's video. If you found it interesting, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos just like it. Also, please go to criminallist.com where you can suggest cases, buy merch, and find out about an exclusive podcast. Also, check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/criminallylisted. But that is all for today. Thanks again for watching.